And whether you want to just call it, rivalry week or hate week, it's Husky week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you played the game, you were there, you played with the Huskies. For you personally, like when you were playing the game, even back then, what was back then? That sounded like so long ago. That was my bad on that one. What was what was the feeling like then when you had this rivalry game when you played the Huskies every year?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. It was pretty intense back then. And I think back then we were fighting for respect. We were trying to, show that we belong in that game and that we were competing against Washington. And I think the first 2 years we lost. My senior year, I can't remember if we won my junior year, but I know we beat them my senior year because we beat them and then USC back to back, which was a big deal for Oregon. It was 2 home games back to back. We beat Washington, then we beat USC. But I just noticed how the intensity level really picked up when we played Washington. So as I see it today, it's the same thing. That rival is real. Both teams are good. Both teams have been playing well. Both programs are, on the map. And so it's going to be a physical one. It's going to be a battle this Saturday.
Does it seem more heated to you, like from an outside view these days, than it was even played on the field then, just because of, I think what a lot of the Washington fans, I would say, is it's because of Oregon's up and coming, so to say, with Nike, and then the 12-year run that Oregon had against Washington. And so it seems like it's been very, very heated the last.
Yeah, I agree because the difference now versus back then, or Washington was beating us for the most part. So they almost felt like we didn't deserve to be in a rival with them. That was the kind of the attitude we felt when we played them. So, but now, like you said, it's different. I mean, Oregon has dominated them over the last 12 years or whatever, and Washington won last year. But now I think the rival has really gone to another level because Oregon is one of the top schools in the country. And I felt like Washington fell off and now Washington is coming back up. So I think now you have a real rival here now because both teams are balling out. Both teams are respected, so I think it's definitely mutual. And I don't think Washington is seeing Oregon anymore as you shouldn't be our rival. No, they definitely see them as a rival now.
I mean, outside of whether you want to call it Civil War or the in-state rivalry with Oregon State every year, whatever you want to call it these days still, I mean, Washington is the next most anticipated game of the year generally, unless we have the opportunity to stick it to USC.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. But you know what, though? I think the Civil War is really starting to pick up its intensity, too, because Oregon State, man, they've been getting us the last couple years. I mean, I think in the last 3-4 years, Oregon State has beat us like twice or something like that. And you almost feel like Oregon State is kind of like that, they're fighting for respect. They feel like they're being overlooked. And they've been playing really well last couple of years, especially when they got their coach Jonathan Smith. And that rivalry always worries me now because I just think Oregon State is always playing with that chip on their shoulder, like they're the little brother and they belong. So.
I mean, definitely. I mean, and regardless, it's still an important rivalry.
Yeah.
Which there's somebody else we can talk about a little bit. But I think definitely of them, the heated one, I think, is still the Huskies. I think that's still way more heated. It's almost like, because I think Spaz and I could agree, probably you too, is if, say, Oregon State's playing Washington, we're like, go Beavers.
Yeah, I know.
Unless, so it's only when we're playing the Beavers, that's when we're like,
that's no, right. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Being from Oregon, Born and raised, I root for the Beavers, except for when they're playing Oregon, because I want to see both Oregon schools do well. You know.
Yes.
Well,
What's more brutal, hate week or Civil War week?
Yeah, I was telling Ben that when I played, we were still fighting for respect to be Washington's rival. And I always felt like Washington felt like they were, like we were beneath them. You guys don't deserve to be our rival. It kind of seemed one sided. And then my senior year, we beat them, and I felt we took a step up. And obviously, in the last 15 years, Oregon has earned their respect. So now I think, like even Ben said, I think the Husky rival might be more intense than the Civil War, because there's so much hate now for the two. Washington hates Oregon because Oregon has really put themselves on a map. They got Nike this and all this, and then Oregon obviously is we've always naturally had that rivalry against them too. So it's really interesting because it's like two different types of rival, but two different types of feelings. It's like you want to beat the Huskies no matter what. Oregon State, you want to beat them, but you want to see them do well the rest of the year,
Yeah, exactly. Is the preparations different for the like rivalry games and whatnot, or do they always, or is it pretty much the same week to week on most levels?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. From week to week, it's the same on every level. Only difference is verbally, the coach is reminding you that it's the Huskies. It's a rival week. They're not going to remind you like when Oregon played Colorado or they play Stanford, but there's going to be a little something extra. It's like when I was in Kansas City, there's a huge rival between the Raiders and the Chiefs. And whenever we played the Raiders, our head coach, Marty Schottenheimer, hated the Raiders. And the preparation was the same, but it was what he would say in the meetings to make sure that we understood we hate the Raiders. We got to beat the Raiders, So it was all verbal. Players are still going to prepare. We're going to still do our job. But the intensity level as far as our feelings towards them was always communicated by the coaches. Even Brooks, Brooks, when we played Washington, he would make his points. When we played the Beavers, he would make his points about why it's a rivalry as well.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, so basically it becomes like an instilled culture of like, okay, we're preparing every team's bad. We want to beat them, but this team we really want to beat.
Yeah.
Really want to beat them.
Yeah. And it's interesting, though, because from a player standpoint, it's like even when I was in Kansas City, I was like, man, why does he hate the Raiders so much? Because I'm going to do my job anyway, whether I'm playing the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Patriots, it's my job. I'm going to still bring it. But it was always really interesting from a player standpoint, how just the coaches, just how much they would just reveal their hate for a particular team, So, but yeah, players are going to play and do their best anyway.
How do you go ahead, Ben?
Oh no. I was going to say all I was going to say is that's an interesting kind of fact. Of course, every coach does something different, but that's an interesting way to look at it or to hear it to go, it's the same thing, but there's that little extra maybe from kind of the staff or maybe the older players who have been used to it. So it's not so much you're training for the rivalry,
right?
You're just
and the difference was against the Beavers. There was always that desire to have bragging rights for a year because we would always know some of the players on the Beavers team. We would always know some guys there. So that in-state rivalry, you literally had bragging rights for a year. And we took advantage of we got you guys, So we took advantage of that, because that rivalry obviously was in state.